Personally, I really started watching college football in the mid-2010s, and over time I've fallen in love with the sport more and more. One program that when I first started watching college football was always at the top was the Wisconsin Badgers. While they didn't exactly have the most flashy offense or the most exciting players, they always won their football games, they had a great defense, and they typically had a superstar running back. Unfortunately, as we've now flashed forward over the last decade or so, Wisconsin has seen a pathetic downfall. They went from a team competing for college football playoff spots and Big Ten championships to now barely being able to beat anybody. I mean, Wisconsin is terrible. They went out and hired a head coach who had dragged Cincinnati to the college football playoff, and instead of getting better results, they have gotten worse than they were under Paul Chryst, who is sort of just average by the end of it. Now Wisconsin fans wish they could be average, and in today's video, we're going to do a long video essay about the downfall of Wisconsin football. And my good friend Jonathan O'Brien from Embrace the Grind, who's a diehard Wisconsin fan, is also going to chime in with his thoughts as well. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the downfall of Wisconsin football. Okay, so before we start talking about Wisconsin now, we have to talk about their last coach, Paul Chryst. Coach Chryst was signed to be the head man in 2015 after Gary Anderson abruptly left for Oregon State. Now that was a weird situation because Anderson's Badgers would finish the 2014 season ranked number 13 in the nation, and they made the Big Ten title game but lost 59-0 to Ohio State. Coach Anderson said he was leaving to be closer to family, but there were some thoughts that it could be because he was embarrassed about that game. Even further back than Coach Anderson though, Bret Bielema actually won 3 straight conference titles while Ohio State was ineligible from 2010 to 2012. These Wisconsin teams were carried by great offensive line play and even better running back play. Guys like James White, Monty Ball, John Clay, and even Russell Wilson were posting insane rushing numbers, and that was under Bielema, and then obviously you had Melvin Gordon and Corey Clement being great under Coach Anderson. Wisconsin had a more clear identity than just about any other team in the Big Ten at the time, and it would lead them to recruiting and signing some of the league's best running backs year after year. This bled into the Coach Chryst tenure, as when Anderson left for Oregon State, Wisconsin went out and signed Paul Chryst, who was the head coach at Pitt. He'd only gone 19-19 with the Panthers from 2012 to 2014, but he'd also been a member of the Wisconsin offensive staff from 2005 to 2011, serving as the tight ends coach, quarterbacks coach, and offensive coordinator, so it was thought he'd be able to keep the same offensive identity of Wisconsin going. He was also a Wisconsin native and had played quarterback for the Badgers from 1986 to 1988, so he knew the culture better than any other coach at the time. He immediately took over for Coach Anderson's team and led them to a 10-3 record in 2015, followed by an 11-3 record in 2016 and a 13-1 record in 2017. In 2016 and 17, he was able to lead the Badgers to back-to-back Big Ten title game appearances, and this was done because Coach Chryst leaned into their identity of running the football. The Badgers ran for a total of 2,843 yards and 31 touchdowns in 2016, with running back Corey Clement running for nearly 1,400 yards and 15 of those touchdowns. They also had some incredible backups like Broderick Shaw, and the downside of Wisconsin's offense is that it wasn't good enough through the air. Alex Hornibrook had thrown for 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 7 picks, and his backup Bart Houston posted pretty much identical stats, but it didn't matter because Wisconsin was just so good at running the football. What really set the Badgers apart though wasn't their offense, it was their defense. The Badgers shut down just about every offense they saw in 2016, and if they lost, it was because their offense didn't put up any points. They held opposing offenses to an average of 15.6 points per game, which was the 4th best scoring defense in college football that year. When you look at their roster of defensive players, it was easy to see why. TJ Watt led the Big Ten with 11.5 sacks. They would play in the Cotton Bowl against a really good Western Michigan team and win 24-16. It was the same story in 2017. The Badgers' offense improved from 28 points per game to nearly 34, and it was because of the running game. Jonathan Taylor led the Big Ten in rushing yards with 1,977 and 13 touchdowns. Hornibrook would improve through the air with nearly 2,700 yards and 25 touchdowns, and Troy Fumagalli was an incredible tight end for them. They also had guys like Quintez Cephas and Kendrick Pryor, and they were just getting better. They went undefeated in the regular season and finished ranked 3rd in the country, looking like they were going to make the college football playoff. But they stumbled in the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State, losing 27-21, and got sent to the Orange Bowl to take on Miami instead. Despite the game literally being in the Hurricanes' home stadium, Wisconsin was able to win 34-24, and there was some controversy as to whether or not they belonged in the college football playoff that year. But there was also hope they'd be able to keep up the momentum and build on the same offensive identity to make it back to the Big Ten title game the following season. They even started the 2018 season ranked 4th in the country. But unfortunately, that just didn't happen, as both their offense and their defense regressed hard, and they finished with a 7-5 record before winning in the Pinstripe Bowl. They looked good to start the year, but were upset by a ranked BYU team in Week 3. After winning rivalry games against Iowa and Nebraska, they continued to fall apart, losing to Michigan, Northwestern, Penn State, and Minnesota for the first time since 2004. They finished the year with just a 5-4 record in the Big Ten. It wasn't because of the running game, though. Jonathan Taylor ended up rushing for nearly 2,200 yards and 16 touchdowns, but the problem was the defense just didn't work, and they lost some games they shouldn't have, with a real black mark going into 2019. They would end up improving to a 10-4 record, and it was because they had a top 25 offense and a top 10 defense. Taylor once again led the Big Ten with over 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns, and all Jack Coan had to do at quarterback was play well enough to keep the defense guessing. He finished the season with 2,700 passing yards and 18 touchdowns, and they would have a top 10 defense again, but the rest of the Big Ten had grown up and surpassed them. They ended up tying to lead the Big Ten West and got another crack at Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, which they lost. After that, they got a chance to take on Oregon in the Rose Bowl, which they lost by 1 point. From there, the wheels fell off for Wisconsin. The team underperformed in 2020, going just 4-3, but was still good enough to place 3rd in the West. The defense continued to get even better, and in 2021, it was the 4th best in the country in terms of points allowed, but a great defense couldn't do much without a workable offense, and in 2021, led by Braylon Allen and Chez Mellusi, they ended up running for 2,800 yards on the ground. Graham Mertz was underwhelming at the quarterback spot, as he only had about 2,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, with 11 interceptions. They ended up going 9-4 in 2021, but those turnovers meant it could do a lot better. Only one of their 4 losses was by 1 score, and that was against Penn State in Week 1. They would then regress even worse the following year to a 7-6 record, as they'd win the Guaranteed Rate Bowl against Oklahoma State. A 2-3 start to the regular season was enough for them to move on from Paul Chryst, whose running offenses had gotten less effective. Braylon Allen led the team with just over 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns, but here's where I think they made their biggest mistake and why they're in trouble in the first place. They decided to fire Paul Chryst after a season where they finished above 500. It was clear the writing was on the wall for the team and the program, but what the athletics department should have done is told Chryst to fire the offensive coordinator who was in his first year with the team. Joe Rudolph had left to help the run game at Virginia Tech, and Bobby Ingram came in from the Baltimore Ravens staff to take over play calling duties. His offense only managed to score 26 points per game, which placed 77th in the nation. So instead of finding the problem with Ingram, the AD chose to throw the coaching staff out, which is what I think is the main issue with this team now. Even if they did decide to move on from Chryst as the head play caller, they didn't roll with their interim head coach, Jim Leonhard. Coach Leonhard had been the architect of these top 10 defenses over the last few years and was elevated to interim head coach when they fired Chryst. He went 4-3 as the head guy and willed the team to a bowl appearance. But most important is that, like Chryst, he was also a Wisconsin guy. He had been a standout safety for the Badgers and was from the state. He understood what the program's identity was and what worked for them. Instead of keeping him as the head coach, they wanted to swing for the fences and hired away someone with no ties to Wisconsin or their style of play, and that was Cincinnati head coach Luke Fickell. Coach Fickell had a lot of success with the Bearcats, with those 2 undefeated seasons in a row, leading to the first non-Power 5 appearance for a team in the college football playoff. Cincinnati had regressed to 9-3 a year later, but he was still considered one of the greatest coaching candidates in the college football carousel. The problem was, his style of offense as head coach was entirely different to what Wisconsin was used to running. He ran a more spread, pass-first offense with the Bearcats, which went against the identity of what had been working for them. And if you think it matters, he was also an Ohio guy. He had gone 57-8 with the Cats, but had never left the state. So when Wisconsin hired him, he was so excited to get to work in his first Power 4 job that he left Cincinnati before their bowl game and right before the Bearcats joined the Big 12. He coached Wisconsin for their bowl game, which they won, and then would start to fill the staff with his own coaches. The team transitioned from smash-mouth style of football to more of an air raid off under Phil Longo as their offensive coordinator, who Fickell brought in from North Carolina. Instead of keeping Coach Leonard as the defensive coordinator, Fickell brought over Mike Tressel, who had been his defensive coordinator at Cincy ever since Marcus Freeman left for Notre Dame. Immediately, the Badger defense tanked without Coach Leonard as they went from the 17th best defense in terms of points allowed to 21st in 2023, and then number 46 in 2024. So far in 2025, they have the 71st best defense in terms of points allowed. Coach Longo at offensive coordinator was even worse. Wisconsin's offense in 2023 was one of the worst, putting up over just 26 points per game. They got even worse then, dropping to 93rd, and then in 2024 it was 109th, and so far this year it's just 13 points per game, which is the third worst offense in the nation. Fickell was able to keep the team competitive in his first year, going 7-6 with a 4-point loss to LSU in the ReliaQuest Bowl. But it's been entirely downfall since then, as they went 5-7 and missed a bowl game in 2024, and they'll likely miss another bowl game this year. Honestly, I think the biggest reason for their collapse is because Coach Fickell has abandoned the identity of what worked for Wisconsin before he got there. He's trying to run an air raid with a team that was built to run the football, and now that he's getting his own players in there, they still can't run this type of offense that he likes. Last year in 2024, Wisconsin's leading rusher was Tawee Walker, who transferred in from Oklahoma and ran for 864 yards and 10 touchdowns. Ironically enough, he transferred out of Wisconsin and is now one of the best backs in the country at Cincinnati of all places. Wisconsin can't even pass the ball well, even though they've transitioned to the air raid, as Braden Locke threw for just under 2,000 yards and 13 touchdowns last year, and they were terrible. Offensive coordinator Phil Longo left the team after 10 games, and they had no offensive coordinator for the last 2. They also brought in Alex Grinch to help the defense, and that didn't work either. So what do I think will fix Wisconsin football? Well, it looks like the writing is on the wall for Luke Fickell, and they'll have to find money to fire him at some point. The first thing I think they should do is call Jim Leonard to see if he wants to take back over, and he is currently an assistant head coach and passing game coordinator with the Denver Broncos, and they're near the top of the NFL in passing yards allowed per game. But honestly, I think there's a good chance that if they contact him, he won't want it, because the last time he wanted it and did a pretty good job, they threw him to the Wolves. There's lots of talks about Lance Leipold taking over as the new head coach, since he also has a history in the state, but at this point, I don't know if he's the type of coach that Wisconsin should target. He's done a good job at rebuilding Kansas into a decent program, but the Jayhawks have now stagnated over the last few years. He tends to run a pass-first spread offense, so unless the team also brings in former offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, I don't think they'll do all that well under Leipold. So if they don't get Leipold or Kotelnicki, I think the next best option is to go for a former Badger who's succeeding right now, and that is New Mexico head coach Jason Eck. Eck is a former Badger offensive lineman and has done a good job at Idaho and now New Mexico since they upset UCLA earlier this year and are now bowl eligible. He would understand the culture at Wisconsin and how to keep the success they've had, and he would not be as expensive to pry as a head coach. But that's just my thoughts on the program right now, and now I'm going to turn it over to my buddy Jonathan O'Brien from Embrace the Grind, who's going to give his thoughts. He's the most diehard Wisconsin fan I know.
Thanks for having me back on the channel, Scott. It's been a minute. Whether Wisconsin decides to fire Fickell or truly give it another year like they're saying they're planning on doing, I think the most important thing is the university actually invests into the football program, because that's the only way we're actually going to be relevant again for college football. Wisconsin's operating towards the bottom of the Big Ten in NIL funding, as well as their recruiting budget year in and year out, and that just does not lead to winning in the Big Ten. If Wisconsin's serious about getting back to the good old days, the glory days of the year 2017-2019 seasons, then the investment needs to go up, because in this era of college football, money leads to better results usually. Now, I'm not saying adding the money guarantees the results are going to be better, but it helps increase the odds of things getting better. And right now, Wisconsin operating at the bottom of the barrel, while it worked in the decades past, it no longer works anymore. They need to invest more into the football program. If you decide to keep Fickell, hopefully the roster stays together, and for once, can we please have a quarterback stay healthy? That's our starting quarterback. We're on Hunter Simmons right now, which has been embarrassing. I'm hoping Carter Smith gets some playing time with 4 games left. I don't think he's appeared in a football game yet this season, so he could come in as a true freshman, retain his red shirt, and play out the remainder of the season. They could show you if you have your quarterback of the future, or if you need to go in a different direction via the transfer portal or recruiting. I think Danny O'Neill's probably gone with the way things have gone so far this season. Hunter Simmons graduates, and I think Billy Edwards probably takes a medical red shirt, and enters the transfer portal once again. The only reason I don't think he's come back from the injury, if he's ever able to play again, if it's that serious of an injury, been out for most of the season. But it's been a heartbreaking few years for Wisconsin, and the collapse has truly happened. And it was before Fickell ever got there, it had started, but it's really been exacerbated under the Fickell era. And I hope we can get back to Wisconsin football, whether that's under Luke Fickell, Chase Eck, Sean Lewis, or just someone else. Maybe the Badgers will be great again. Currently, I haven't watched a Badger game in a few weeks because I just won't watch Hunter Simmons play quarterback. As a lifelong Badger fan, I just won't subject myself to the pain that this offense has been the past few weeks. Thanks again for having me on the channel, Scott. If you are not subscribed to Scott Fisher, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever he posts a brand new video.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Johnny, for hopping on the channel, and hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you're a Wisconsin fan, though, what the heck has gone wrong for the program? What do you guys need to do to fix it? And what topics should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.